end of high school, I was fully hooked. I went from really quickly placing a couple parlays here and there to placing bets on almost every game. I've gone through a lot, and it's hard to even have these memories of the things that I did when I was in active addiction. But, there was no win that was enough for me. It got to a point where no amount of money would have gotten me to stop.
Today's guest is Uri E. He's in recovery from a gambling addiction where he spent years chasing after huge hits, and there were nights where he won and lost six figures. But before we dive into his story, I have just one favor to ask from you. There's so many of you that watch this channel regularly but haven't yet hit that subscribe button. If you would do me the favor of hitting subscribe, then my promise to you in return is that I'm going to continue to work hard each and every day to spread the message that gambling addiction is real, but so is the help that's out there. Hey everybody, welcome back to the One Day at a Time Gambling Addiction Podcast. Today's guest is Uri, and he's 7 months into his gambling recovery journey. Uri, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and so we got connected because we have a mutual friend. We may or may not talk about him later on in the episode, but I'm really interested to hear, how the last 7 months have been. But I guess before we get to that point, we should start from square one. Tell the people what's a little bit about how you got involved with gambling.
Yeah, so my gambling goes all the way back to high school. I placed my first ever bet when I was in ninth grade, my first parlay, and I hit it. It was my 6-game parlay, and I hit it. And, what I thought was the best moment that I've had in a while turned out to be a death sentence for me. I remember being so excited after hitting that parlay, running through the school, showing all my friends, how easy it was to just put some money down and win a couple $1,000s, picking some hockey games. And, that's kind of where my gambling addiction really started. I think since then I started chasing that high ever since.
Wow. So for those that might not be from America, ninth grade, you're what, 13 or 14 years old?
Yeah, 13. I actually grew up in Canada, so this was, as we say there, grade 9. But It was a 13-year-old. In Canada, it's actually legal to go to the convenience store and place bets. This was long before the online apps. And I remember we would get some older people to drive us. We would place bets at the local convenience store. And, that's where a lot of this started was, just the easy access to picking sports games back in high school.
So Canada's gambling age, you have to be 19 to gamble, right?
Yeah.
So being that it's a little bit younger than the US, did anyone question you as a 13-year-old pulling up to the store and putting in a bet? Or they were just like, he looks 19. What was it like?
No, I think we got someone older to actually place it for us. We would fill out the cards and then they would submit them.
Gotcha.
Kind of worked like the lottery. You just pick your numbers and then you submit it at the counter. So here there's a counter to place your picks and make your bets. And I remember, standing with my friends in the corner of those convenience stores for hours, just filling out parlay after parlay, hockey games, football games. I remember when I hit that first one is when I remember the excitement from that, and that really just got me hooked. All throughout high school.
Do you have a hockey team that you support?
I do. Unfortunately, it's the Toronto Maple Leafs.
I saw a funny video about them the other day. It's why do you support them after they've lost for the last 40 years? But that's just true fandom, I guess.
Yeah, you can't pick who you're born into. So thankfully I'm a Blue Jays fan, so I get that going on right now.
Hey, we'll see. This video's coming out after the World Series will be done, so
yeah,
we'll see. People might be laughing at you.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, you're a big fan of the Maple Leafs. When you start gambling on them, how does that change your relationship to the team? Did it change the way you watched games? Did it change the way you think about games? What did it do when you began gambling versus before?
Yeah, well, for a long time, I never picked against them. So I was always just doubling down on my fandom, right? Which was probably a dumber move because I let my bias, feel my picks. But yeah, it just became less about watching the game and watching the sport and more about tracking the number of bets that I had and making sure, I had action on almost every game.
Wow. Would you still watch them if you didn't have action on
them? My hometown teams, yes. Other teams and other sports, definitely not. I really didn't care aside from being able to show my friends or being able to win money on it, But, I think it started very innocently, right? Just picking a few games here and there. And then it's just crazy how quickly it escalated, right? lead, us to be spending all day in school filling out tickets. I would take money from my parents to buy tickets, and at the time, never really thought anything of it. It just, I was a high school kid, didn't have a job, so I needed to get some money to fuel what I know now is my addiction.
Yeah.
So whether it was taking lunch money and using it for bets, or whether it was taking money directly from them, I got to a point where I couldn't miss out on weekends of football or certain hockey games. So by the end of high school, I was fully hooked. And then after high school, I ended up moving to Israel for a couple years, and I thought, I'm in Israel now. I won't be able to make any bets. I won't be able to gamble. This might be a good thing for me. And I remember going to the mall right near where I was staying, and they had a bodega in the mall. And pretty soon I became best friends with the guy who ran the shop. And before I know it, I was making parlays of Israeli basketball, of soccer, of, or football as they call it there.
Mm-hmm.
And just, again, trying to find that same high that I felt in high school, to be able to show all my new friends in Israel, all the amazing wins that I had. Part of it was more just to fit in and be able to like be the big man on campus by showing, all the amazing bets you've been winning.
Yeah. I have some Israeli basketball knowledge because I myself am very much addicted to gambling. I remember betting on like oh god, I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation, like Heppel Haifa. Like
Hapoel Haifa.
yeah,
Yeah.
that I was gambling on that kind of stuff too, and I was doing it from New Jersey. So I mean, at least you had that excuse at the time that you were
Yeah, I
there.
was I was an Israeli basketball expert being there.
Wow.
Just picking Maccabi Tel Aviv or Hapoel Yerushalayim, and yeah, I at the time though I still did not think I had a problem. I just thought this was
Mm,
what everyone does. We were just having fun watching games, you
mm,
know. And then when I came back, I went to college in New York, and again, this is before anything was legalized, right? So it was a lot harder to actually place bets. But working with bookies or the OneBetter.com website, I started to get back into betting when I came back here, and pretty quickly I was full fledged, gambling on almost every game.
wow. What vaguely like what years were you in college in New York?
Around 2002 to 2006, I think, and then I went to grad
Gotcha.
school in New Jersey.
Gotcha.
So yeah, and I remember back then I wasn't really much of a casino player.
Mm,
I would frequent here and there, and when I would go, I would definitely go hard. But it wasn't something that I felt like I had to drive to Atlantic City or to parks every day. It was when I went there, I definitely took advantage, or the odd trip to Vegas, but I didn't feel the need to be going every week. It was a very occasional trip for me. And then, most of it was sports betting related, or joining all the football pools or hockey pools that I'm in. That really was most of my time in the early 2000s. Um, and then when obviously all the apps became available, that's when things went to the next level.
interesting. So before online gambling came around, you would say like casino just kind of didn't really do it for you, but if you did go, it became a gambling binge.
If I did
Is that
go, it was
fair?
definitely a binge, and I was doing with friends. We were having fun,
Mm,
but I was never the guy trying to round up the troops to go to Atlantic City. I would
sure.
join. Don't get me wrong, I'm still a degenerate, but it wasn't something that I felt the itch that I had to do. I was
Yeah.
fully satisfied betting the occasional football game or hockey game. I wasn't going crazy. I was still, for the most part, betting within my means. And casino was just something that I binged when we went, but not
Sure.
something that I fully, was addicted to the way I was, once those apps came out.
So then I think your story is going to lead to be a great example of the difference between like what gambling used to be like and now what gambling's like today. Take us through the first time that you start gambling online with the new apps.
So once those apps were available, I want to say it was probably like 2019, I would say,
Mm-hmm.
or around COVID time. Yeah, I remember my friend showing it to me, and my mind was blown just at the simplicity of being able to place a bet. And I remember, once those apps came out, I went from really quickly placing a couple parlays here and there to placing bets on almost every game. I think the biggest change for me was all the live betting, right? So you know, back in the day, you make your bets. You had to have them in by 1 o'clock, and then you were set for Sunday, right? There was not
Mhm.
any live betting. You weren't going back in to chase. Now, I still want to get my bets in by one, but then you can still be live betting throughout the games at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. There was really no end of. There was no deadline on your bets. It was like 24/7. So
Yeah.
I don't think I went into it crazy hard at first, but within a few weeks or months, I was betting thousands a day on parlays.
Wow. Yeah, I think that it kind of it reminds me of something you said a little bit earlier on. It was like you kept doubling down and doubling down on Leafs games back when you were in high school. You know, when you were doing this online gambling, because this is something that I did. This is why I'm asking the question. When you would be losing a bet that you placed after like a quarter or after a half, would you double down on the same bet at like an alternative spread just to get more action, keep that kind of sense of like I don't want to be wrong
Oh,
about the bet kind of thing?
of course.
Yeah,
It didn't. At least with football, you didn't count anything until after the last game was played. So
yeah,
you always had to keep chasing and keep doubling down. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think with the apps, it just became a 24/7 obsession versus like an occasional thing that I did.
yeah. With the fact that you were betting thousands of dollars a day on parlays, it leads me to ask the question: were you ever offered a VIP host?
Oh yeah, I had VIP host at DraftKings. I had a VIP host at FanDuel. That's when things had already gone haywire, but when things just went to the next level. When I started with DraftKings, it was mostly sports betting. It was actually all sports betting. I didn't really
Mm,
even go to the casino. I think in the back of my head, I knew the second I started that this would not end well. And I wasn't really a huge casino player. I played occasionally, I played blackjack. I wasn't a big poker player like my friends were. Um, but I remember one day, it might have been during COVID, because at that point there was no sports to bet on. And my friend really showed me the casino app. And because every time he would come over, he'd be playing on these games. I had no idea what he was doing. So he showed me the casino, and that's when things really became problematic for me. It started off with blackjack, and there were some nights with blackjack where I would win and lose six figures in a single night. And there were times where I would keep depositing money that I didn't have because I knew that on weekends they wouldn't be able to really deduct it from my bank until Monday morning. So I had a lot of kind of Monday morning freakouts when my bank account was in the negative because of how much I gambled over the weekend. Um,
mm,
but once I started playing blackjack, and then what made it what was the worst thing for me was the online slots. That's when things went to the next stratosphere where I couldn't stop because as an addicted gambler, it was all about immediate gratification. You don't want to work for your money. You just want to pick a game, and everything was monopoly money for me at that point.
mm,
So you still had to wait for the game to end. Once you started playing online slots, I mean, you're talking about every every millisecond, you're just pressing a button and you're losing money and money and money and money. And there were times where I would win a ton of money, lose a ton of money. There were times where I would win a ton of money, and all I would have to do was just move my thumb an inch to exit the app, but I
mm,
couldn't do it. So I think to answer your question about the VIP host, I did have a VIP host at both companies, and they would give me free tickets. I would have boxes to sporting events, to Leaf games, to concerts. But the biggest thing was every Monday morning I would wake up, they would have $5,000 in my account ready for me to play.
wow,
So they'd be giving me tons of free play. And it became a point where in my head, I convinced myself, it doesn't matter how down you get, you're getting free money Monday morning. You're going to win it all back.
yeah,
And I know 5,000 sounds like an insane amount of money to most people, and it is. But when you're gambling to the levels that I was gambling, everything was monopoly money. That $5,000 when you're playing $50 slots is gone, can be gone within an hour.
absolutely. But I'd imagine it also kind of led to this belief of like, man, I'm making 20K a month doing nothing. Like this is the best kind of job of all time,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Something like
it
that.
affected me
Yeah.
everywhere. It affected me at my work because like why am I
Mm,
working so hard when I can be making all this money? You know, I I work in New York and I live in New Jersey, so it got to the point that it was so bad that not only was I doing it 24/7, I was doing it all night. I was doing it in the morning. I was spinning slots in the shower, in the bathroom, while I was driving. But I knew exactly where the New York New Jersey border cut off because in New York, online casino is not legal. So I would be spinning slots driving to New York, and then I would park in the shoulder on the highway just a few feet before the New York border because I had to finish my game. And there were times where I would pull over and tell myself just 5 more minutes, and then you got to get you got to go. And I'd be there for 2 3 hours still spinning because I just couldn't stop chasing. So yeah, it got really extreme and really bad pretty fast.
I had a very similar experience to a lot of what you just said, and I'm wondering how much the audience relates to it because I related to every word that just came out of your mouth. Like gambling in the shower, I was big into like the stock market, so I'd be refreshing like stock charts while I was in the shower, just holding it next to the shower, like dumb stuff. And then I lived on the border in college of Virginia and Washington D.C., and Virginia had sports betting, D.C. didn't have it at the time, and I would go on jogs where I would jog across the bridge into
Mhm.
Virginia and then I'd sit there like 1 foot over the bridge and just gamble on sports. So that's super relatable. I'm sure looking back, you probably just lump it all together. But at the time, did you view the sports betting separately to the casino? And if so, like how did it motivate you continuing to play?
Even when I was still doing casino gambling, I still had to get all my sports bets in. And when I was placing those parlays in my head, I was like, "You're wasting your time making sports bets. You could have been winning all this money playing slots or blackjack." So I got to the point where I would make my sports bets in New York, knowing that it wasn't, because that was the only thing that you could do in New York. And the second I crossed back into New Jersey, I was all into the casino. So I was doing both, right? And I think when it became obviously it was a problem for a while, but when it became really problematic, is I would be winning crazy parlays, eight, nine, $10,000, which normally would have set me for the month or whatever it was, but that would go straight into the casino. So it's hard to even think back then because like I feel like the last 7 months I've gone through a lot, and it's hard to even have these memories of the things that I did when I was in active addiction. But there was no win that was enough for me. It got to a point where no amount of money would have gotten me to stop. If I was losing, I would just find anything I can to gamble more, whether it was taking out loans or borrowing. There was nothing I would that would stop me from getting more money. And when I was winning, in my head, I'll be set now for a year. But when you're betting slots and you're doing sports picks and everything's on your phone 24/7, that money goes really quick.
That money's the fuel for us. I mean, it's what we use to keep going.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people watching as well. So it's been 7 months since you made your last bet, but what was it that got you to finally stop gambling? And what was the process like the first, couple of days after you did stop?
So in my head, I kind of convinced myself that I would be fine suffering in silence with this addiction for as long as it took, right? As long as I can get my next fix, get more money, that, with gambling, all your problems are solved by one spin of the slot, right? You're due for a win, so you just keep convincing yourself that as long as you keep getting money, you'll find a way to either win a big parlay or win six figures on slots, but all your problems are just one spin away from being solved. That's what your brain convinces you of. So in my head, I was prepared to suffer as long as it took until I got my next hit or my next win. And you tell yourself, you're going to stop. This is a problem. It's affecting everything about you and your life. But the addiction is too strong. It keeps rationalizing things for you. I think where I really knew I had a problem and I knew that I couldn't go on like this is seeing what my addiction did to the people I love most, right? For me, this was just a disease that affected me, right? That I was able to fake it with everyone around me that I was fine, that there was no issue. Um, but, I'm married, I have a wife, and I have 4 kids. And there were times where, aside from the fact that I was just not present with them, even when I was with them, I was attached to my phone. I couldn't be present with my young kids, who I love dearly. Seeing how some of my mood swings really affected the way I interacted with them, whether it was taking out my anger at my gambling losses on my family, or the fact that I was gambling all night, that I just had no energy in the morning because I had just fallen asleep at 6 a.m. and my kids are waking me up at 6:15. All my kids want is their dad to make breakfast for them, and I'm yelling at them at 6:15 in the morning not to wake me up because daddy's been gambling all night. It was really horrifying, and really felt tons of shame, tons of guilt for, what I've put my wife and my kids through. My wife would always ask me what's wrong, would always ask me why I'm so, why I've had so much anger, because I'm typically a very happy go lucky, positive guy. But the last few years, she noticed a shift in me. Um, I was a shell of myself because the only thing I cared about was my next win. The only thing I cared about was staying in the action. So seeing how it affected my relationships with my wife and my kids, my family, my friends, anyone who I was borrowing money from and lying to about why I needed the money, um, I knew that I needed help because I knew that I couldn't stop on my own. And I think where it came to a boiling point is, there were certain people in my life who had found out or who knew what was going on with my addiction. Um, and I couldn't allow any of that, to get to my wife without me telling her first. So I knew that I had to come clean to my wife about my addiction, about what I've been doing the last few years, and because I couldn't have her hear it from anyone else but me. That was really important to me. I put her through a lot. There were times where she'd be at the grocery store checking out groceries for our family, and the credit card wouldn't be working because I had just maxed it out the night before. Or I would keep telling her, Friday is when everything will be fine. Don't worry. This Friday, everything will be fine. I get paid on Friday, but my brain had conditioned me to wake up at 3:30 in the morning when my paycheck hit. And before she woke up, that money was already gone. So every day was just the mental gymnastics I had to go through every single day to figure out how to get more money or figure out how to make sure that she had what she needed, that my wife, that my kids had what they needed. Knowing what bills were going to hit, figuring out who I could still borrow from because many people who I borrowed from, wouldn't lend me any more money. It was exhausting, and all that without getting an hour of sleep every night. I honestly don't know how I went on for so long without getting help.
Wow. Yeah, the sleep part, I feel like I'd go insane. It must have been really just an insane amount of stress towards the end. Um, what was the conversation like the day that it all came to light? How did you tell her? How did she react to it? And then kind of like what happened?
I kept pushing it off, right? Because your brain keeps trying to get you to put the addiction keeps trying to tell you to push it off
Yeah.
and saying, you don't need to tell her. All you didn't do is keep playing and you'll get that win and everything will be fine.
Mm,
So I pushed it off. Told her I was going to tell her Sunday, then Monday, then Tuesday. And honestly, it was a Wednesday night at 11 o'clock at night. She was asleep on the couch. I had just probably lost our last penny that week. And I was sick and tired of feeling like this anymore. And I needed help because I wasn't going to be able to do this on my own. So I came clean to her this one random Wednesday night, told her everything, came clean about everything, told her I had a big problem, that I needed help. And, the love and support that she showed me. I mean, in my head, and I think in a lot of gamblers' heads, the biggest fear is coming clean because you think that your loved ones are going to are not going to respect you. They're not going to love you anymore. Your wife, your girlfriend is going to leave you, whatever it may be. Um, what I felt when I came clean was really the opposite, was just the love and support of my entire family, you know, understanding that I need help and that they would do whatever they can to get me that help.
yeah.
So, 3 days later, I was in inpatient rehab.
Wow. I feel like a lot of I can absolutely relate to that. It's like we keep telling ourselves that it's going to suck so bad if we tell someone what's going on. It's going to be the worst. It's going to ruin everything. But at the end of the day, that's just another excuse not to make a change. And I think that there's a lot of people watching this probably right now that can relate to that feeling of like not wanting to make that step. But
Yeah,
as you just said, it was the opposite.
I have many friends who I know are struggling with this addiction.
Mm,
People who I gambled with nonstop.
mm,
Um, and I try to tell them, I try to help them, but with this addiction, the only way that you're going to get help is if you finally admit that you need help and you're willing to do what it takes to get the help yourself. I'm here to help those friends of mine or other people in need whenever they're ready for that. But it's one of those addictions because I was there. There were people convincing me to try to get help, and I would deny, lie to them, tell them everything's fine. I had a really close friend, my brothers, who I would share with them, look at this huge win that I hit, or when I would win six figures in slots, and they tell me, okay, now you got to stop. I'd be like, no, I'm fine. This was just a one time thing. So I get it. I denied until the last possible moment, until the well ran dry, until I felt like I absolutely needed to.
mm,
And to me, it was less about the money because there's always with us, we're very resourceful addicts will find a way to get money to fuel further addiction. For me, it was this addiction is gonna drive me absolutely insane. I think the Gambling Anonymous book talks about driving you to insanity, prison, or death. And
Yeah.
you know, I convinced myself that I was fine, but I was absolutely on my way to one of those things.
Yeah. And I think that most of the time, what I'll say is like, if you're struggling with a gambling addiction, it's not about the amount of money that you're losing, it's about the amount of damage it's causing in your life. But I also haven't met many people who have won and lost six figures in one night. What did you feel after it was all done? What was the feeling inside after you had X amount and it became nothing?
A lot of it was first disbelief, right? So I had turned like a couple $100 into six figures in blackjack in one night, and then I kept playing and I lost it all. I went back to zero, and then in that same night, I did the exact same thing. I built it back up to six figures, and then lost every penny of it, and then I kept depositing until I was out of my own money, and then some. Um, and that took until about 6 or 7 in the morning, and that's right when my kids were waking up. So you can imagine that the emptiness of feeling that all your problems are solved, that you're set for the year, you're set for thinking about all these amazing dreams and things you're going to give to your wife and your kids because of all this money you now have. Then you lose it all. Then you're feeling shameful and guilt and empty. Then you win it all again, and now you tell yourself, okay, now stop. And then you can't stop, and then you lose it all, and now you're even in more debt because you keep depositing money. And now I have to be a father, and I have to be a husband. I felt empty. I felt completely disgusted with myself for doing that. I felt ashamed. I felt guilty. I just felt like an awful, awful person. Um, but all I wanted to do was chase. I just wanted to chase and get it all back because that's the thing with this addiction. It doesn't matter how much money you lose. You need to keep chasing and chasing and chasing until you win it back. But even when you win it back, it's never enough. You're going to lose it all again. With this addiction, there's really no winning. My friends would always joke with me, yeah, but what about all your losses? You're not showing me all your losses. I'm like, yeah, of course. Who wants to see losses? They just want to see wins.
Yeah.
But it's the truth. I don't believe any gambler who thinks that they're up money in this. It's a completely lose-lose situation. When you win money, you give it all back, and when you lose money, you lose even more by chasing it.
Yeah. There, I kind of just say like all wins are future losses.
Right.
It's my friend Rob calls it a temporary loan.
I think
Um,
being in recovery now and like occasionally seeing a game or seeing a play, and like in my head, I'm like, oh, I would have picked that and that and that, or I would have picked. But then right after that, that voice comes on and says, yeah, but you would have given right back.
I had to have that talk with myself yesterday. Actually, there's a new meme stock, and it went up a couple 100%. Today, of course, it's down like 80%. So
Hmm.
glad I had that talk because that's exactly what I would have had. I would have had 100% gain and then an 80% loss followed it up.
Yeah, it's
So
funny because during COVID, when all the sports went away, and this is before the online casino, I got really big into options trading.
me
And I knew
too.
nothing about stocks. I knew nothing about options, but I taught myself and spoke to some friends who knew what they were doing. And to me, I was like, I first started picking some stocks. I'm like, wait, so I could win a couple $100 if the stock goes up a few bucks? Like, that's not exciting. Like,
Mm.
what's the parlay of the stock industry? So they're like, oh, it's called stock options. I'm like, okay,
Mm.
let me learn about stock options. And I remember turning about $10,000 that I had in my Fidelity account into over 200,000 because I had picked all the airline stock options at the bottom of the market during COVID,
Mm.
and they all just soared. I did cash out some of that, but I ended up losing all of it because didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to cash out of options or sell my options. And this reminds me of just like even when I'm winning parlays and I'm getting these cash out options, like or if I have one leg left on a 8 game parlay, like I think most gambling addicts will never hedge, will never cash out because they want it all. So yeah, I definitely had a foray into stock options for about a year or two while there was no sports, but since then, for me, it's been all kind of sports and gambling and casino gambling.
Yeah, options are definitely gambling. Anyone listening that was considering doing stock options, don't just don't do it.
Yeah.
But so the last 7 months, life's been better. Tell me about the recovery journey. How did it go? What happened? And how you feeling?
It's been an eye opening experience. Obviously, it's been a journey, and like your podcast, I absolutely live by this one day at a time mantra. I think the biggest thing for me when I first started into rehab was just getting myself away from my life for a little bit. I have a very stressful life. Thankfully, I'm so grateful. I have a wife and 4 kids, a job, a lot of stress on me, and gambling was my escape. It was my escape to my dream world where I didn't have to deal with stress. I didn't have to deal with any of life's problems. I just had to open up my app and I'd be in this dream world. So the big part of my recovery was just going away for a couple of months, not having access to my phone, not having access to my addiction at all, and being able to just reset my brain. I think just being there without phone access, without a lot of the things that keep us addicted was something I absolutely desperately needed. I don't really understand some of these people who are gambling addicts who are trying to get help, but they still have their phones, they still have access to all the apps, they still have, it's like a heroin addict walking around with heroin in his pocket. Honestly, it's to me, I absolutely needed to go away and really, really understand more about why I was the way I am, why I'm addicted, what the root causes of my addiction are, what the triggers are, healthy coping mechanisms. And then when I went to Right Choice Recovery in New Jersey, I went there for outpatient rehab for about 3.5 months, and that's really where we dove a lot deeper into the gambling curriculum and the root causes of my gambling, and ways to healthfully cope with life and life's problems. I think Rob, the head of the rehab, always talks about dealing with life on life's terms, and for me, gambling was my escape, and um, whether it was drugs or gambling, anytime there was a tiny bit of stress, that's where I went to. I think with my recovery, it's learning to live in the discomfort sometimes. It's learning that stress is a part of life and we have to deal with it. Um, so, yeah, I mean, I look back to where I am today and to where I was 7 months ago, and it's night and day. I have a functioning brain again. I'm a husband. I'm a father again. I'm at work again. I don't think about gambling. I don't have any urges to gamble, thankfully. I remember going to my first ever gambling awareness, GA meeting, probably about a couple weeks into my recovery, and my mind was blown when I walked in that door. I did not know there were any other assholes out there besides me who was gambling all their money away, who was taking their kids' college fund and putting it into slots or parlays. I couldn't imagine anyone would be as dumb as I was. But walking into that room and seeing 30, 40 people share their stories, my mind was blown. Like, these were people who are all just like me. Some of them were in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. Some of them were in their 20s, but we were all the exact same in that room, dealing with the exact same problem. And my first meeting, there was someone there that was celebrating 3 months, and to me, that was like crazy that I would ever get 3 months of no gambling, because I had never gone more than 2 or 3 days without it. Um, but I learned early on in the program to just take this one day at a time. And, you can't think about tomorrow. You can't think about the past, but you can control today. You can control when you wake up that today I'm not going to gamble. And that's how I've lived my recovery the last 7 months. I wake up every morning. I pray. I pray to God to control my urges and keep me a day free of gambling. When I go to bed at night, I thank Him for letting me not gamble, not use drugs, not drink. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think the days pile up pretty quickly when you have the approach of one day at a time.
It's phenomenal. I always find it so fascinating how wise and well spoken people are in recovery. Like, I don't know if it's just because we have practice of going and speaking every week at a meeting, but I just want to thank you for being here and for sharing this story with us, especially because 7 months is relatively new into the recovery journey. But hearing that things have turned around so fast, I mean, it's got to be inspiring for a lot of people who probably are thinking to themselves, I can't go 3 days without gambling. If you were not talking to me, but you were talking to someone watching this video and they're on the fence of maybe I should get help, maybe I should keep going, do you have anything that you would want to tell them?
Absolutely. I mean, one is definitely get help, right? There's a lot of resources, and Rob has an incredible Instagram page highlighting all the resources available to addicted gamblers. You can call me, you can call, and other addicted gamblers who are going through the program, but you cannot do this on your own. This is an addiction that in many ways is probably the hardest addiction to crack, because it's full of lies and deceit and dishonesty, and it's full of your brain rationalizing behavior that is just completely irrational. So you absolutely need to get help. A couple things that I tell people who are struggling is one, you need to delete all the apps off your phone. You need to install the Gamban software that will not let you install these apps. And then you need to self exclude, because one of the things that I did early on was I went to the Meadowlands racetrack because that was where you had to go to self exclude in the state of New Jersey. I thought it was pretty cathartic that they were making you go to a racetrack to self exclude. And I remember walking into the racetrack there, and I was face to face with a sports book. And this is 3 months after coming clean and being clean for 3 months. And I remember pulling up to that racetrack and seeing the zombie walks in the parking lot. All those people who were coming out at 11 a.m. probably spent the whole night there, losing all their money. And it really hit me hard because that used to be me. And that was me coming out of the casino. That was me taking my head out of my app after betting for the entire night. And I remember looking at them and saying, I never want to be like that again. I walked into the self exclusion office, and the person there, I told them that I was there for self exclusion. So they took my paperwork, they took my picture, and I asked them, are there a lot of people that do this? And she actually said to me, no, I wish there were. Um, that, with the advent of all these sports betting and sports apps and online casino, and you can't escape the ads, driving on the turnpike or anywhere, they're everywhere. There should be thousands and thousands of people who are taking the step to rid this from their life, because I'm happier today than I've ever been because of this, because of coming clean and going to recovery. My gambling addiction was a prison for me. It held me hostage, whether it was keeping me, stuck on the couch every Sunday because I had to watch every game, or just keeping me up all night, all morning. I was a shell of myself. There's no good that comes out of gambling. And I would tell all of you to seek help immediately, um, to delete these apps from your phone, to self exclude. And, if you're in the state of New Jersey, Right Choice Recovery in South Jersey is an amazing facility that really treats gambling addiction and really helps you understand a lot of the reasons for your addiction, and really helps you into recovery. So there's a lot of resources that you should take advantage of, because you cannot do this on your own.
Yeah, and once again, if you want to find out more about Right Choice Recovery, check the description of this video for a link over to their site. Uri, what's next for you? What are you going to do next in the next couple months?
I'm going to continue to live this life one day at a time, Rob. I'm going to wake up every morning, going to keep praying. I'm going to be the best husband, father, and son that I can be. I'm going to be a functional member of society, and I'm going to enjoy life. As a Toronto Blue Jay fan, I'm actually really much enjoying this playoff run, not because of what it used to be, which is just another sport, another game that I could bet on, but to be able to have unbridled joy watching sports with my kids, with my son. So we're going to enjoy this playoff run together as a bonding experience to bring us closer together. I'm going to do the things in life that I enjoy, like playing ice hockey, playing tennis, all the things that I deprioritized because I couldn't stop gambling. Um, and there's still a journey ahead of me. I still have a lot of challenges because of my addiction, whether it's financial issues or relationship issues that I still need to work on. But I'm going to continue to take this one day at a time and be the best person that I can be today. That's the only way forward for me.
Well, as a depressed Phillies fan who wants to see the Dodgers lose, I'm rooting for you. And as a recovering gambler, I'm rooting for you to continue in your recovery as well. If you're in the audience and you want to hear another story of someone in recovery from a gambling addiction, check out this video next. Let's keep getting better together, one day at a time.